Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to get to introduce you to Jule Kim. Jule is an executive coach and certified imposter syndrome coach, and she's dedicated to helping immigrants become confident leaders. She's helped executives all over the world learn the art of listening and confident communication so that they can cultivate strong, resilient teams. Now, all those C's trip me up, Jewel. Jules also the author, and if you want to show your thing, she's also the author of Self Love Affirmations and Reflections, a ritual for self worth, self compassion, and self care. It is a beautiful card deck, and it's available on Amazon. Can you show that, or did you show that?
I did show it. I showed the
Awesome.
box and I can show I can show the actual
Oh,
cards.
that'd be beautiful.
I don't
Yeah, I
know
think you
who.
should just
Mhm.
maybe a card or two. These cards are just beautifully designed and they have just like reflections and affirmations, but they're not your typical fluffy, I don't know, pie in the sky type of affirmations. They are very thought provoking and just really well done. So I encourage anyone to check those out. So, Jewel, thank you so much for being here with me today and spending time. And for those of you listening, I just want you to know I have been wanting to interview Jewel for a long time because she is just like this multifaceted gemstone. It's like you turn and you look at it different angles, and it's like no matter what angle you look at this gemstone with, it catches the light and just shines its brilliance. And that's really how I see you, Jewel. You are just incredibly multi-talented and um, so I'm just so grateful that you are here today. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Nikki, thank you for such uh, the compliments and your warmth and your generosity. And thank you for having me. I'm glad that we're finally doing this.
Mm, well, yeah, there are so many directions we could go here with our interview. But the first thing I'd really like to ask you about is your journey as a coach, and going back to the multifaceted gemstone. I think so many coaches tend to get very stuck, and me too. Like, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone else because I've done this, years ago. Just getting stuck in the idea, oh, I've got to pick a niche, I've got to get it right, and everything seems like it's got to be so perfect, and you got to just do things so right for your marketing and all of that. And yet I know you have really had quite a journey, and I'd love for you to share just anything that you would like to about your own journey as a coach and how that's progressed for you.
Well, let me see. Where do I start? I don't know if this is what you intended, but I think this might be helpful for the coaches who may listen to this in the future. So I'll be real honest. It's only been about 4 years since I've been coaching. And I'm saying I enrolled in a coach training program 4 years ago in 2020. And that was the beginning. Now, maybe what was a little unusual is that I already had clients that I was coaching even before I started the training program. I did not represent myself as a certified coach whatsoever, but it was definitely like I can help some people and I'm going to charge for this because I had been in the habit of giving away all my time for free to my friends, to my coworkers, my peers for most of my life. I've always been that person people would come to for advice. And I think it's been the same for you. You know, you're a natural focal point for many of the people in your life as well, from what I know of you.
For sure.
Now, I'm going to be real honest. I went into the coach training program with so much ego and arrogance. It's embarrassing. Yeah. Hubris, I think is the word. And I went into it thinking I'm going to be an amazing coach and I already know how to coach. And I've been to law school and I know how to ask a question. This is going to be like that. You don't ask questions you don't already know the answer to and just cringe, you know? It's like if you know anything about coaching, you know that that is nothing like what coaching is. So, what happens? I go into the training program, and unfortunately, I do kind of agree with Marion's perspective here that most of the programs out there don't actually teach you how to coach. Somehow, I spent 9 months of my life in this program where we met every single week. There was a webinar to watch. So, that's the class every week. You had to take a quiz. You had peer sessions. So there was a group session and there was a one on one of you coaching and another one on one of you being coached. So if you think about that, that is an insane number of meetings every single week. And yet to come out of that with the terrible realization that I don't think I actually understand how to coach. And what's even more embarrassing is that I failed my coaching final. So, like most schools, in order to pass and get the certification, you have to turn in a recording of you coaching somebody. And unfortunately, I did not treat this with the gravity and the respect it deserved. I didn't prep. I felt like, yeah, I'm going to wing it. I'll be fine. Turn in the recording. 2 weeks later, I get a very kind message, but it did not sting any less. It said, unfortunately, we don't think you meet the standards for the PCC markers. And that's because this program is what's now known as a level 2 program. And they were like, you're going to have to try again. And I tell you, as somebody who has spent most of my life disassociated from my emotions, I didn't know what I felt. My husband at the moment, he was like, oh no. And he hugs me. And I was like, okay. I tell my friend, and my friend was very quick to be like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. It doesn't matter. And while I know she was well intentioned, her response is unfortunately like how I think a lot of coaches respond, where we're so intent on making our people and our clients feel good, we don't actually allow space for that person to share what they're really feeling in that moment. And so then what happens? A month later, I suddenly have a total breakdown. I realized what it meant to have failed my coaching final. I couldn't go on to get my ICF credential. I would have to retake the final. I would have to humble myself. I would have to reveal to somebody that I need somebody else to be my client again. I need to go out and expose this truth about myself. How embarrassing, how humiliating. And there was this moment where, the month later, it just all came crashing together. And I remember I was sitting in my kitchen and I just sobbed. I just broke down into tears. My husband was just like, oh my God, like, what is happening to you? And he hugs me again. And then that's when the real journey begins.
Mm.
So, fast forward today, I am so fortunate to be able to say maybe about a year after that, like, I actually got my PCC. So, I put in the work. Later that year, at the end of that year, I turned in my second attempt at the recording, and this time I passed. Hallelujah. Right after that, I joined Marion's
Mm.
mentor group program, and that was life changing for me. It helped me start to learn that the program I had just been through, it was not suited to my learning style. So the mentor group with Marion Franklin and with her son David Franklin was life changing in that it started to help me see where my gaps were. And unfortunately, the previous program hadn't done that enough for me. Now, the other gift of the mentor program was that I devised my own way to learn through all of the calls I was watching, experiencing, I was receiving coaching, but it helped me really understand what coaching is. So I started to build my confidence. And I know you, Nikki, you've mentioned this before. I've heard you call this crappy coach syndrome.
That's Marion's term. Yeah.
ah,
Yeah.
would you mind explaining what that is?
Oh, well, I think it can show up in different ways, but mainly it's coaches feeling like it's not good enough. They're not good enough. Um, Maybe they're taking on too much of the client's responsibility, or they're just, after a coaching session, they come away thinking, well, what did I even do? So it kind of encompasses a lot of different things, but it's basically a coach focused on their own performance rather than just letting go of any of that and just being with the client and not taking on any of the client's responsibility. Crappy coach syndrome can bite you in the butt anytime you're focused on yourself or taking on that responsibility that's not yours. Yeah.
Yep. And so, one of the key pieces of what you just said around focus on your own performance, and I would even say just focus on yourself, period. Right? You're worried about how you're appearing to the client. You're worried about whether you ask the right question. You're worried about whether you're good enough as a coach. It's all you,
Right.
right? And so this is the number one issue. Your desire to feel your self-worth proved through your performance, through the coaching, and unconsciously looking for your client to give you that
Yeah.
is a really key problem here. And I see
It's
this in
not
almost every
okay.
coach. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's one of the biggest pieces I had to work on unraveling and to also come to acceptance with the fact that I wasn't actually that good as a coach because I was new. And that is normal. There's nothing wrong with that. So, this is another piece where so many new coaches, I think, struggle with this journey because we don't like to accept that in the beginning part of pretty much everything, it's gonna suck. It's not gonna be good. It's not gonna feel good. And coaching being one of the more intangible fields of to learn how to do something, it is, I cannot explain to you like the feeling, the field is so vast. There's 100,000 ways to do something, to come at something.
Mhm.
And then, of course, it requires some level of self awareness and just history and experience with people in general to kind of have a feeling of this is how people tend to react in these situations. And so it's a balance. You want to know that generally people kind of react like this, but leave enough space to know that perhaps this person might not fit that though, and yet be able to apply the same lines of inquiry and questioning and reflection to help that person see something and yet not make it about you, right? So the other piece that I think was really important for me to understand is what you said about not taking on the client's responsibility. And so I've recently been delving into this idea of responsibility and what does that mean? Because we throw around words like responsibility and accountability all the time, and I don't think we actually stop and question what these concepts mean. So, responsibility, I'll just frame like very simply is whose job is it? And when you think of it like that, your job as the coach is not to make the client feel better. That's their job. Your job as the coach is to just take what they've given you and maybe help them look at it in different angles, from different perspectives. Perhaps sometimes to guide the lens, or what is that called? Oh my gosh, I can see the picture in my mind, but I can't find the word for it.
Mhm.
I'm having a brain fart.
Well, that's okay. I will jump in with, like, I really appreciate what you've said about the well, I love the way Tijan, one of our colleagues, puts it, and she says, "Don't be a happiness bully." And I just love that. Like, it's so important. Like when your friend came to you and was trying to console you and, oh, it's okay. It doesn't matter. It totally, and I'm not dissing your friend here at all, but something like that can totally invalidate what that person is going through, what they're experiencing. And if we're not careful, we can do that to our clients. And so it's so important to just be present and with our clients and not try to move them out of this place of trouble or problem or grief or wherever it is in the moment, to really listen and see what's really going on here, what's making this such a problem for this person, before you ever look at helping them move forward. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I think it's so important, and it's really part of respecting the client's humanity, and even in everyday relationships, respecting our friends and our family members' humanity by just listening and being there and being present and not trying to solve everything so quickly. So anyway, I don't know if that threw you off kilter, but just wanted to add a few points there.
No, I think that was really great. And I agree. So, again, if we look at the idea of what is the coach's job, I would say it's just to help the person look at their situation, to maybe understand what's going on. But like you said, how teaching says, like, don't be the happiness bully. And we unfortunately do that so much of the time in our lives every single day because we ourselves are uncomfortable with witnessing someone else's struggle. We
Mhm.
don't know how to handle these things because most of us haven't been given the skills. We haven't been taught these things on how to handle somebody who's going through a difficult time. We don't understand beyond the words what it means to actually hold space for someone. And so I think a lot of coaches come into the profession thinking it's their job to make someone feel better. And that is absolutely not it. Or that it's their job to transform someone's life. And again, I don't think that's it. I think those may happen as a byproduct if you do your job as a coach, which again is to help people see what's going on,
Mhm.
just help them understand like why is this such a problem. But ultimately, it's like you got to ask yourself like why did you get into this line of work? And what is it you want to get out of this? I think there's a reason why we see so much churn in the industry beyond just a business perspective. It's just like with all industries or careers, we see a lot of people who come into things with maybe misconceptions about what it's about.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And
Yeah.
I want to reflect back on something you said earlier, respecting our own humanity as coaches as well. You said something earlier that reminded me about I think some coaches, newer coaches anyway, they'll come in and they tend to think, as you did, oh, this is easy. I can learn how to ask questions. I can learn how to get people from A to B. And they don't recognize how much depth there is to this profession. Like, if you are really wanting to be a masterful coach, it's not a checklist, and there's not a time frame for when or how soon you're going to get it, you know, and then it's going to all come together for you, and that you're going to be able to integrate all these things you've learned in coaching school. And it breaks my heart sometimes because coaches get so upset with themselves, or they feel like, well, I should be able to do this by now. And who says? Because it takes time. It's just like some people can learn to ride a bicycle the first time, and some people it takes several tries. I remember when I was a kid, my cousin and I both learned to water ski at right about the same time. She popped up on the skis the first time, and I just about drank the whole lake by the time I figured it out. So everybody's different, and everybody learns these coaching skills at different rates. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there as well.
I think that's really fair. It's something that we all fall into, though. There's some level of comparison going on. We either are looking at what other people are doing, or we have, for some reason, we're comparing other parts of our journey to this journey. And again, just like you said, like, well, who said, like, why do you have this expectation? Because that's totally arbitrary. It takes as long as it's going to take. And unfortunately, I don't think we understand most of the time is that our level of judging ourselves, the self judgment, actually slows that process down.
Yes.
So imagine the energy if you just came to the process as excited as you were when you were a kid with something, when you learned how to walk, and when you learned how to ride the bike or how to ski or how to do anything. As children, most of us were not busy comparing ourselves. Well, why does that other 4-year-old do it so well and I don't? It's only when we get older that we start to compare ourselves and then to find ourselves inadequate, which then just places more obstacles in our way. And we don't even see we're doing that. So the self-judgment, I think, is really critical here because, of course, I was doing that in my earlier journey as a coach.
Mhm.
I still have moments where I look back on some of my client sessions and I think, "Oh, I missed the moment here. I should have asked this. Dang it." But the big difference here today, like, 4 years in, is like, well, I'll get to it at some point. So there's a certain comfort I find in knowing that even if you do miss like the quote unquote real issue, is that if it is a real issue, it will come back around because you haven't solved it or you haven't like pointed at it for the client, and the client themselves will continue to evidence the same patterns. So don't worry, it's not like a one and done deal. It'll come back around and you'll have your chance again when you see it the next time. And all you can do is your best. It's like there's no such thing as not good enough.
As long as you are breathing, there is room for improvement. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to feel good about it, okay? You don't have to feel overjoyed and, be so high vibe or think to yourself, I, I shouldn't be this way. Throw those notions out if you can. And just accept that this is the experience and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it really is. Even when you are going back and you're listening to your own coaching sessions or you're looking at your own transcripts for your own educational purposes, it really is just about being neutral, just like we are with clients. It's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then figure out what could I have asked differently here? What might have been better? What did I miss? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, at least I see it now. And just to be curious and neutral about yourself as well as your clients. And of course, doesn't always happen like that. We're all human, but the the more practice we can get with doing that, the easier, as you said, the journey becomes because you're not wasting all this precious energy and emotional output by being frustrated or comparing yourself to someone else or comparing yourself to some perfect you in the future that you think you've got to become, which you don't.
Yes. And here's the thing that I'm just going to point out to everybody. We have heard probably 1,000 times in our life, if not more, by this point, to be curious, to be more curious, to stay curious, or to be neutral. And again, these are concepts of like, how do you actually do that? Now, there was something that I remember, I don't know who said this, but when I went through Marion's program, so I've been through multiple coaching programs by this point. I think a big part of this coaching journey, like if you're really serious about being the best coach you can be, is you have to figure out your particular learning style and then go get that or create that for yourself, which is what I did. I think I leaned much more towards the I created that for myself. But the other really big piece of this is I don't know who said this in Marion's program, but one of the brand new coaches in my cohort said, "What should I do right now? Like at this point, what are some of the things I should do?" And it was either you or maybe Carol, or I have no idea. Somebody said you should go hire a coach. And that is one of the things that it took me a while to understand. Like, that is not meant from a stance of you have to drink the Kool-Aid. You're not a coach unless you yourself have a coach, sorry, which is what I've seen all over the place. I've seen people spouting nonsense like, I wouldn't trust any coach who themselves doesn't have a coach. And I was like, oh no, it's none of those things, not from my perspective anyway. It's number one, let's say we're talking about shoes and you're going to sell shoes, and yet you yourself have never worn shoes in your life. How on earth do you think you're going to sell this thing as a product? You don't understand the pain points of shoes, of high heels, a shoe
And
that doesn't fit very well, a shoe that's too tight, that's too loose, a shoe that has a certain finish, a shoe that is waterproof versus one that isn't. There's a million different directions this can go. And if you yourself have never worn shoes, how can you sell shoes? It's no different for coaching. But there's
I
actually a
love that.
deeper reason for this. So, number two is you will not be able to show up curious or neutral or not as much as you could if you don't work on yourself. And that was really the most important lesson that I learned.
Mm,
So the way I think of this is when you show up the client, and this is like the real interesting thing I learned in one of those random like ICF learning sessions is you are in what's called a container. And for me, the way I envision the container is a pool. Okay, it's a clear pool. And you and the client are both dropping things into the pool. Now, the problem is when you don't work on yourself and you yourself don't receive coaching, you will inadvertently throw more things into the pool than you should. You start to cloud the water because of your own filter, your own perspectives, your judgments, your labels, and you won't even know you're doing that. And so, because of that, you will be less able to see what the client is dropping into the pool because you're clouding the water so much with your own junk.
mm. I love that metaphor. Yeah, you're clouding the water and you can't see what's going on. Yeah, that's brilliant. And Marion always said that coaches, it's our job to clean up our side of the street. You know, you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to have it all together, but it's our job to be working on cleaning up our side of the street.
Yeah.
That really
I
always hit me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that because it acknowledges the reality that you have a side of the street. So this is maybe one of the biggest bones of contention I have with my first program is they taught that you were to bring nothing of yourself into the session, and that is
Mm,
just not realistic. There's no way you can do that. You're not a robot.
right.
So it's to accept the reality that you will bring of yourself into the container with the client. It's just a question of which pieces and how can you do this in a way that supports the client without clouding all the waters, with your stuff. So it's something I think that the moment I learned that, I was like, oh my gosh, it was like a light bulb moment because I'd been feeling so much guilt and shame. I was like, oh wait, there goes another judgment. Oh, I shouldn't have said it that way. Oh no, I offended the client. It is like, my
Which, of course,
goodness.
then brings the attention back on you where it doesn't belong. So, yeah,
Yes.
and I'm sure that these other programs out there, I'm going to assume a good intent, right? I mean, they're probably just trying to help people learn how to be neutral, but being neutral doesn't mean being a robot, like you said, nothing. You are human. I say it all the time. Coaches are human too. And you're obviously going to bring your yourself, your knowledge, your experience. All of that goes into who you are as a coach. But that doesn't mean that you should cloud the water with those things like you're talking about either.
You know what just
Mm.
popped into my mind is when I was listening to you just now, it's being neutral doesn't mean to be absent. And I think that's the
Mm.
unconscious assumption we have is that we should be absent. And how is that possible? Because you can't be. You have to be present in the conversation. And that means bringing you.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's almost like one of those diagrams of like oh, I don't know. Since I can't see, I may not describe it correctly, but you know that like the dotted outline of a person or a happy face, just a little dotted outline, like it's there, but it's not there. It's kind of what popped into my mind when you said being absent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. So, kind of as a final bit to this part, Jewel, if you were to go back and if you were able to tap yourself on the shoulder that when you first, started this journey and were thinking, "Oh, I know how to do this. I can ask questions. I've been trained as a lawyer." What would you tell yourself if you could?
Ooh, I should have anticipated this question. That's actually a hard question because it's like what makes it hard is you can't tell someone to not do that. Like what happens as soon as you tell someone to don't do something, they want to do it
They're
more.
gonna do it.
Yeah. I think maybe if I could go tap myself on the shoulder like 4 years ago, I would maybe just offer a reframe. Like, what if that's not coaching?
Oh.
What if that's not what coaching is and that's not what coaching is about? And perhaps that might have cracked the door open in my mind, just enough so that I could then let go of my ego, which of course was completely ruling the show.
Mm. Yeah, just reframing it, a perspective shift. Oh, wait, what if it isn't? Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
because then most people will naturally fall into the, huh, well, then what is it if it's not that? I mean, maybe some of us will be like, no, no, it isn't. Like, of course it's this thing. But once you get over that hump, and then you're like, okay, well, what if there is a chance that that's actually true? Then what is it?
mm.
And then see, now you have the space to have curiosity.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. That's what sparks the curiosity. Oh my gosh, we could go into a whole I mean, I had this all other question come up about curiosity. We're not going to go there because I have other questions that I need to ask you. We'll have to do another one sometime. But yeah, that's just amazing. Thank you for all those words of wisdom, Jewel. I do want to get into though this a little bit of discussion around um, content creation because I know that is something that you really seem to have kind of cracked the code on, or at least you know a lot about it. I know the publisher that you worked with, and I can't remember who published your cards. Was that random? Which publisher?
It was an imprint called Zeitgeist. So the imprint of Penguin Random House.
Penguin. Okay, I thought it was Penguin Random House. Okay, so it's an imp. Yeah, Zeitgeist. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, because my memory, you just never know. Um, they contacted you, right? They came to you and said, "Hey, would you like to partner with us in doing these cards?"
Yeah. I I was pretty lucky, I would say, because like how that came about was from a relationship with one of the people who worked on like a side team Penguin back
Mhm.
then. And this person had originally found me when they worked at HarperCollins. And so back in the day, that person invited me to join the influencer program at HarperCollins. And the way they found me was from my content on Instagram. They felt like I would be a good fit. So they were trying to, I think, get this new program up and running to support people like myself, professionals like you and me, coaches, mental health, therapists, like anybody in the profession or the career of supporting other people. They were trying to create a program just to support people like us.
Mm.
And so it was like a what do you call it? Like a journey of that relationship where that person remembered me. And so when this project came up, and what's really interesting is that these affirmation cards is a pioneer as a product for Penguin. It's either the first or one of the first card products for them. And so the self love affirmation cards were proposed as a product by somebody internal to the team, and they were looking for someone to actually do it, like create the product. And that's how this came about. They approached me after stalking me, my content on Instagram, and seeing if this would be a fit. And then they invited me to do it. Yeah.
Well, So I get that that is a real outlier. Like that doesn't happen for most people. But my point is, it did happen for you. And so I'm gonna gonna ask you a real leading question here, which is not what we should do as coaches, but we're not coaching right now. So, um, Jewel, then would you say that content creation of some kind is important for all coaches?
I do, and not for the reasons that one might think if they've been listening to us so far.
Yeah.
Okay.
So why don't you elaborate on that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think content creation, if we're literally talking about you creating pieces of content, whether they are seen or not seen, is extremely important just to clarify your own process of thought, to know
Hmm.
where you stand, how you think, your values on various subjects, what's important to you in this world, what's your opinion, how do you feel about things, what types of subject matters are connected to what other subject matters. And if you're able to do this, regardless of whether there's an audience or not, this will help the quality of your coaching immensely. This will clarify so many things for you. If you can take the time to distill what's running through your mind and put it onto paper, like just think of it as an extension of the reflection process that Marion teaches in her program. Like the best reflection is for you to be able to give back something in perhaps a different way or a distilled way, right? And this is what I think content creation, the best part of it is really about, is to give that back to yourself in a different way or to help you see, eliminate certain things. It's a reflection process for yourself. Now,
Yes.
if you're able to do this though on a platform and actually develop an audience, of course, now we're getting into the whole business mechanism. How do you drum up enough business so that you can make this a sustainable living as a coach? Yeah, this has a huge impact for you. I'm not saying everybody has to do it. I think a lot of the coaches I know, they may not actually produce content, but their content production, quote unquote, is actually through the form of in person networking. So I'm not even saying it has to come through the form of writing. Do I think writing is useful? Absolutely. And I know you're a writer too,
Hmm.
but it can come in many, many different channels.
Yeah. Yeah. I cannot remember who said it, but there's a quote that I love that says it, I'll probably butcher it. It says something like, "How can I know what I think until I see what I say?" As a writer, that wrote that. I think it's so true. It's like until we kind of dump what's in our brain out onto paper or out on the computer or screen or share it with somebody in some manner, um, it really does then help get all the cobwebs cleared out and help us really see what's most important. Where are the bits of gold in here?
Yeah.
So I agree. Yeah,
There's
but
something.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say quickly, there's something about how you said that, especially the speaking portion. It reminds me of something I read in The Prosperous Coach. I think that's the correct book. Like very early on in that book, the author says, how many people out there would benefit if they just like even went to a lamppost and spoke their thoughts?
I've heard that. Yeah. Maybe our universal symbol for coaching should be a lamppost. I
Oh,
don't know.
I like it. Double meaning there.
Yeah. But you're supposed to shine your light, right? So there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Um, so you were talking about how important it is just to, get your thoughts out. And then you kind of went over to, well, if you can build a platform, build an audience, how how do you think or what can be helpful to people to get over that fear though, that fear of sharing, practicing in public, as Jeff Gowen says, because then it's like, oh, what if I say something that's going to upset somebody? What if I say the wrong thing? Again, all this focus back on our own performance rather than just sharing and see what might help. But what advice do you have for that, for people to get over their fear of practicing in public?
Well, not to sound like I've drunk the Kool-Aid, which I obviously have, but it's to get coaching around it.
Mm,
I can't tell you how many of my clients have brought this exact subject to coaching. And it is amazing how alike we are more than we are different, like across cultures, across races. We're all different people with different backgrounds, and yet we all seem to have a universal fear of being seen and found lacking.
mm,
So if you think about that, it's like ask yourself, what do you think is the worst thing that's going to happen? And then what? And then what? And then what? So keep asking yourself, what do you think is the worst that can happen? And just keep following that thread all the way down and see what's lurking at the root of that. The other piece I would say is just acceptance. It kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about when you start anything new, you are probably not going to be very good. And with content, I find that even more likely. There is a particular journey here with content. Number one, I find that most people come into this not understanding it is the journey and self discovery you did not expect. That is what really content creation is about. Because of that process of having to elucidate and clarify and distill your opinions out into the universe in some way, it helps you understand yourself better and other people better in the process.
mm,
And again, it's going to be that fear of what if I think or say something that other people find is a reason to no longer want to know me. So that fear of loss of connection is very powerful for us. And I honestly think that that's probably the biggest driver like of what creates what I call mediocre content online.
mm,
You have people who don't put in the work, like what I'm describing, who just push out average content. They're regurgitating other ideas. And, to some degree, that happens. Like we all learn kind of in the same way. We first learn through modeling. We look at what other people are doing. And then we're like, oh, that person's just posting a bunch of quotes. Maybe I'll do that. Or that person is posting funny cat videos. Maybe I'll do that. And that's natural. It takes a while to find your voice. You probably have gone through this process in your writing as well, I would imagine.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. What was that like for you?
Mm. Well, I just remember, I think one of the most vivid memories I have as as far as writing goes is I remember years ago I was going to participate in National Novel Writing Month, which is every November, and you write to successfully, quote unquote, successfully complete this challenge. You write 50,000 words in 30 days. And I was part of a writers group at that time, and my daughter had actually completed that challenge the year before. And I thought, oh, well, let me try that this year. I'm going to try. And I just remember sitting down to start this challenge, and I had all these ideas in my head, and nothing would come out like I thought it should. And I just remember thinking, what is wrong with me? What is this about? All the ideas sound really good up here, but then when you try to filter them through your fingertips, it just like it was broken. And that was really a moment of awareness for me of like I had heard, I knew intellectually, oh, it takes a while to find your voice and all of that, but that really hit home. It's like, this is a practice. It's not, again, like coaching, it's not a checklist, it's a practice of doing it day in, day out. Some days it flows well, some days it doesn't. And oh well, you just do it. There's another quote. I'm a quote person. Talk about quotes. But there's another quote that says, I only write when I'm inspired. and I see to it that I'm inspired at 9 a.m. every morning.
Oh,
And
I
so
love that.
it really is like, I think a lot of us, where writing is concerned, we seem to have some airy fairy idea that it's all inspiration and when the muse shows up or whatever. You got to sit down and show the muse that you're serious, and do the work. And some days it works and some days it doesn't, but you get something out. I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, it was just a real process for me, a real learning moment that, yeah, you really do have to work at finding your voice. It's not something that just flows, or at least for me, it wasn't. Maybe some people it comes easier. So I don't know, but it was work for me.
I think it is for most people, to be honest, is it tends to be a process of shedding layers of other people's voices and thoughts in our heads. It takes a while for us to find what's just us. What do we think? What do I think? What do you think about this one thing? And even if the topic is something that's pretty central or pretty big, like for instance, the presidential debates, just happened. That's a hot topic in the news right now, but what's your particular take on this? So that's kind of what I feel is the whole process of finding your voice is to do that one thing. And that may sound simple, but as you know, most of the hardest things in life are simple. And we make them not simple and much harder because there are all these other concerns in the way. What will people think? What will people say? They're
We
going,
overthink it. We think it to death. Yeah.
yeah. And we fear judgment from others. And so one of the most common questions I've gotten on this topic with my clients is, what if they judge me? I'm like, oh no, they will judge you because that's what people do. There will
Yeah.
be people who will absolutely judge the shizzles out of this, and it has nothing to do with you. So
Right.
again, it's like taking that responsibility for what someone else is thinking or feeling. It's like that's not your job to do. And I get it. It's not going to feel good, but that's also part of this process with content is to learn to shed that as well. And I'm not going to say you shouldn't care what other people think because unfortunately, like we are a social species, we do care what other people think, but it's to not let that impact and alter your decisions for yourself, for you to still choose what you want to do, despite knowing that there are going to be people out there who don't agree with you, who think you should not be doing this, you should not be in this space. And that's okay for them. But again, it doesn't really have anything to do with you. So that's a huge piece of this. I find that many people they live in dread of that happening. And I'm like, it's kind of what's that saying about you're shutting the barn after the cows have already escaped? It's like that.
Yeah.
It's that has already happened throughout your entire life. You have been judged and found wanting by so many people in your life or people passing through your life, and you're alive. You didn't die. And this is not really any different from that.
And isn't it interesting how we tend to focus on those what ifs in the negative sense? What if I'm judged? What if they don't like it? What if they leave a nasty remark? Rather than, what if somebody does like it? What if what I share makes a real difference to someone today? What if, what if someone might actually hire me down the road because they read something that really resonates with them? I mean, we get to choose because we don't know. I mean, this is all in our head. So why do we focus on
Oh
those
my
negative
gosh.
stories?
Yeah, it's what I call the curse of twisted creativity, to be honest. It's like most of us will employ our imaginations to imagine the worst case scenarios. I was like, you do understand you can do the opposite of that because the really funny part is that all of this is Fantasyland. So if you're going to live in Fantasyland, why don't you at least imagine something amazing instead of the worst?
Live in the castle and not the cave, right?
Yeah. It's like,
Oh gosh.
hello.
I love that. So, Jewel, um, I know you have offered Oh, actually, I do have a couple more questions. I know we're running really long. Let me just ask you this one thing because I think it is really pertinent. When as coaches are looking at creating content, and we'll talk more about an opportunity that is coming up in just a moment. But AI has exploded on the scene, right? In the last couple of years as we record this. What advice do you have for coaches regarding like will content creation still be valuable? How is AI going to impact them in their content creation? Any and I know that could turn into a whole other topic, but any words of wisdom that you want to share regarding AI?
What are some of the most common questions you're seeing from coaches about AI? And then maybe we can start from there.
Mhm. Well, I think a lot of people, I don't know that, I mean, I work with writers and coaches, so I don't remember where I've heard what. But I think a lot of people are afraid that it's going to take over. Or on the flip side of that, oh, I can just use AI to write all my content for me and I don't really have to do any writing. Things like that. Like, what would you say to people who are either afraid of it or they think it's just the be all end all for content creation?
People who are afraid of it, I think the fear that somehow AI will take all our jobs and render us useless in some way, I think that's probably the actual thing to address.
Mm.
The truth is, we don't actually know what's going to happen in 5 years. And actually, I think if we're saying that that's a reality that could happen, I think we're looking at around 2 years from now, is my guess, just from everything I'm seeing in the development of AI. And as someone who has been using AI in the last, like, since 4 years ago, actually, have I seen tremendous leaps and improvements in the technology? Of course, my goodness. When ChatGPT came on the scene, it was an explosion. And I think I just saw something crazy. Like they've passed 11 million paying subscribers, like just this month. So I don't
Guilty.
know. Yeah, and me too.
Mm.
It's something that's really interesting because had you asked me a year ago, can AI do what I do with coaching? And I would have said emphatically no. But now when I'm looking at what AI seems to be able to do, I can see that it's actually a real possibility. The pieces where I think still remain undiscovered or unproven as AI being able to equal human talent is where intuition is involved.
Mhm.
And that's something I just haven't actually seen any real evidence of AI being able to equal that human level of intuition. And when you ask me what is intuition, it's the ability to make connections between things that are seemingly unrelated. So you think about some of those moments where I know you've seen me do this in the mentor groups. I know part of this is facilitated because I have a pretty good memory, but you've seen where whoever is being coached, and I'll be like, hey, this kind of reminds me of this one time you said like 3 months
Yes,
ago.
you are
Eh,
brilliant with that. Yes.
yeah.
Every time you do that, I have a pretty good memory. No, you have a memory like a steel trap. I'm telling you, it's incredible. And like you said, it's not like you're consciously trying to remember that. You just have a really good way to connect those dots, whatever that is in you. And it is amazing every time that happens when you bring up something that one of our mentor group participants literally said months ago and hadn't mentioned since. And that will come up for you and you will relate it and it'll be like, oh, yes, that's it. That's the connection. So that human intuition and the ability to connect the dots like that creativity, it is so important. And that is definitely a piece that I don't think AI can compete with, at least not yet. Yeah. But I do have a mentor who he says, I forget what time frame he gives, maybe within the next couple years or the next year. And that may have been a year ago. I don't remember when he said it now, but he says basically artificial intelligence will be able to do ACC level coaching. No problem. He says that's why everyone needs to constantly be working on improving, 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 getting those coaching skills up, PCC, MCC level, because yeah, the ACC level where it's pretty superficial, that can all be done by AI. So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
I believe it. When I said the 2 years from now, that's coming from somebody I know who is a very active prompt engineer. He is doing the most insane things I've ever seen, producing these GPTs and having things like he literally just messaged me 2 days ago saying, "Hey Jewel, I just created this GPT to help us reparent ourselves." And I was like, "Oh my God." Like this is crazy. So
Oh,
I
wow.
have no doubt that that's coming. So to the fear that can a AI do what we do, I actually believe that is probably going to be true. Now, what I also think is true is that we will never stop craving human connection.
Exactly.
It reminds me of a scene that I recently saw in the newest Star Trek. Uh, what is it called? Is it Star Trek Discovery? One of those, like the very newest season right now.
Yeah, I've totally lost track of all of it. And I'm a real Trekkie too. So I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And you see somebody who is having a conversation that's like therapy, but it's with the computer, it's with the AI.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, well, that's one way to do it. And I think some people will be okay with that. And I think some people will not. Just like how today there's some clients who are okay with themselves being recorded and some are really not okay. So I
Right.
think it will come down to each person's particular preference.
Yeah. There is something though about that humanity, that human connection that I think we're a ways away from, although I have heard that they're building robots with human like features now. So I don't know, who knows what's coming. But bringing this back to writing and how AI can either help, let's look at maybe how um one thing that bothers me is when people think they can just kind of put some simple prompt into AI and come up with an article and slap that on their website. What would you say about the people that are doing things like that for their content creation?
I think that's one way to go about it. It's what I call like the low hanging, not very good quality fruit, but okay, it's better than having nothing.
Hmm.
Now, AI is one of those things because I have had so much experience with it, especially over the last 2 years. What you put in is what you get out. So if you put in a very simple prompt, you're going to get something probably not that great coming out. So the quality of the output is directly related to the quality of your input prompt. And the more you feed into the prompt, the more parameters you give it, the more guidance you give it around the voice and the quality. There's this neat article I saw online, and I can send you the link later. There's this acronym called RISEN, and it's each of the steps you want to take through engineering your prompt. So, like, what role do you want it to have? I think the I is impact, maybe. Um, I can't remember the other stuff, but like the N is how do you narrow this? How do you determine that it was successful? So, to define each of those parameters along those 5 guidelines, if you do that, the quality of what comes out for you is probably going to be 10 times better than what you're getting now.
Mhm.
So, you can, and if we're talking about people panicking over their professions being rendered obsolete by AI, it's like this is what I was seeing 4 years ago. All the copywriters out there were having meltdowns, mass online meltdowns. Everybody was going crazy. And I said, you know, who should really be afraid of this are the people who aren't that good at writing because AI can do not that good writing.
Mhm.
That's absolutely replaceable. So then if you come to the idea of, well, what's not is your perspective. Nothing is going to replace what you think and your personality. So if we're talking about how can you leverage AI in a way that's helpful, is for you to give enough guidance to the AI so that it reflects your actual personality, your beliefs, your values.
Mm.
In tools or programs like ChatGPT, there's a section in there where you can define, here's how I talk, here's my brand. I'm more prone to use this type of language and not this type of language. So you give it parameters and you give it guidance. The other thing you can do is to upload source files of your own writing and teach it. This is how I write. And then the more you do that, and it takes effort, I'm not going to lie, this is not an easy process, but the more you train it, the better it gets. So again, the quality of the output is directly related to the quality of your input.
Yeah, I have really seen that. And when you gave us, so for those of you who aren't members of Coaches in Cahoots, Jewel had done a little workshop for us a while back on AI and how to prompt it. And oh my gosh, even just a few simple things to add to your prompts can make a huge difference. So, just saying that's in our membership area if anyone wants to join. But I do want to get on to this workshop that you're going to be doing here soon, Jewel. I am really looking forward to this. I think you called it, so it's starting October 1st, 2024. And if you're seeing this afterwards, it's okay. Go ahead and go to the link that we'll tell you about in a minute, because there may be some ways that you can get a hold of that in through Jewel. But I think you're calling it the art of content, how to craft compelling content. Is that the right title?
Yes.
I love that, the art of content, because there really is, there's science and an art to coaching, there's a science and an art to crafting this content. So, what do you want to tell us about this upcoming workshop, Jewel?
So let's get the bare logistics out of the way first. It's going to be 3 days, 90 minutes each day. And what I find is most challenging for just people in general, not just coaches, but especially coaches, is an inability to articulate any clarity of thought around any topic, really. So, just like how you and I were talking before we started hitting record on this session, and you and I were talking about how emotions have recipes. So, we have heard all our lives, or I think most of us have heard many times in our life, that the words you use shape your reality. But what does that actually mean? And unfortunately, there are many concepts like that that kind of fly over our heads where it sounds good. It's what I call sounds good, but doesn't withstand the true test if you look at it under a microscope and you start to dissect pieces.
Sounds kind of out there somewhere.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
yeah.
it's what I call fluffy.
Mhm.
Sounds good, feels good, but I don't know how to actually apply this to my life. So something that I was so excited about is watching Brene Brown's special, Atlas of the Heart, I think is what it's called. And on episode 2, she talks about how she recently came across some other emotions researchers' research. I think her name is Kristen Lindquist, if I'm not mistaken. So then I fall down the rabbit hole and I go look up Dr. I think she's Dr. Kristen Lindquist's research, and I read the paper on this. So, what is meant by emotions have a recipe? It's that when you experience a feeling in your body for the first time, think of it like a hunk of clay. If you're in the generation like with me and Nikki, you may have seen, what's that movie with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore? You know, where she's doing pottery and he's behind her.
Oh, gosh. I don't know.
Yeah, oh my gosh. He's a ghost, right? Like that's the movie. I can't remember what
I
it's
think
called.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no idea, Jewel.
I
I'm
know.
terrible with movie names. I don't
I know
know.
we're gonna have somebody comment it in after.
Yeah, there you go.
It's been one of those days. Like it took me forever to remember. It's a magnifying glass. What I was trying to say earlier.
Oh,
So
well, you said lens. That makes sense. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just imagine yourself with a raw hunk of clay on the pottery wheel. That's the beginning of your emotion. Now, what happens is what shape that clay takes comes from your language, the words you use to describe that thing in front of you. That determines the shape. So when I think now back to the phrase of your words shape your reality, this is, I think, what that means. But when we're talking about emotions have a recipe, now it's so much more tangible. Okay, so it's up to you if you want to turn this hunk of clay into some beautiful vase or you want to turn it into something that looks like a car ran over it. It's totally up to you. And I'm not saying that like with judgment. I'm just saying whatever shape it takes is up to you. And the shape it takes comes through the function of your words. So if you don't like how you're feeling and the emotions you're feeling, the easiest step is to take and change your words of how you're describing the situation. So, one of the most common things I hear people saying all the time these days is, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed. You have to stop and think, ask yourself, is that how you're actually feeling? And so, this is part two is the words you choose are extremely important because you can inadvertently shift your emotion from one to another. Hence, the hunk of clay sitting in front of you can change the shape. So maybe you intended this shape to be something else and suddenly it morphs because of the words you chose. Now, think about how I just described that to you. There's a huge difference from someone saying at a very 20 or 30,000 foot level, words shape your reality. You need to talk to yourself better and have more positive self-talk. Contrast that, which is typically what's floating out there in the online space versus what I just said. Which thing are you more likely to remember? That's
Oh,
what I'm
what
going
you
to teach you.
said. Yeah, with this clay. Yeah, and so that's what you're teaching at the workshop. You're going to help us really make it tangible is what I'm kind of gathering here.
Yeah. Very specific, very tangible if possible, and to bring it down to earth where normal people can understand these things. So that's what I mean by most of us out there are suffering from very vague, fluffy language, stuff nobody understands, and therefore we don't relate or connect to that. And that's going to be very hard to do if you don't even know what you think about any given topic out there. So, part of this process is to one, get specific. The second part of this process is to even identify what you think about anything. And then the third part is to drill down and really get to one little nugget that you can then highlight as the centerpiece of your content.
Beautiful. I'm excited. I'm so excited. So, what we are going to be doing is we are, Jewel has graciously offered to do this in conjunction with Coaches in Cahoots. So, the first day of the workshop, October 1st, will be open to everyone as a guest of Coaches in Cahoots. So we're going to have information on this at, I'm just going to give, the link isn't active yet, Jewel, but it will be by the time this airs. So it's coachesincahoots.com/compelling content. So coachesincahoots.com/compelling content. No spaces, no dashes, no nothing. And I just realized how many C's there are in that. But oh well. Um, and you'll be able to find out more about the workshop and how you can join us that day. Just as a guest, no cost to you to come and check out Coaches in Cahoots, check out Jewel, and take part in the first day of her workshop. And then you are welcome to sign up for the full 3-day experience. Oh my gosh. Well, I tell you what, we have gone way over what I expected. You are incredibly generous. Um, trying to think if there's any other details about the workshop. It will all just be on that page. So just go to that page. We'll have our act together. And um Jewel, how can people find out more about you if they would like to follow you, check out your Instagram? Like what's the best way people can start following you and learning more about you?
I'm most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. LinkedIn a little bit more than Instagram these days. I'm also available on TikTok, so it's kind of you take your pick. But if you're looking for the most recent stuff, it's going to be LinkedIn.
And I'll get your LinkedIn um, the link to your profile and we'll put it with this video so people can easily find that. Um, is Jewel, but is it Jule Kim on LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah. JuleKim.
Mhm.
But we'll put the link with the video for sure so people can easily find it. And I just, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for this amazing interview and for your time. And we really, really appreciate it, Jewel. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Nikki. I'm grateful. It means a lot to me that you're sharing your platform with me. And, I have the most immense respect for you and your journey as a coach. And to know you, you are such a fabulous human being. And I am so blessed to know you. So thank you.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Jewel. Well, one of my favorite things about being in this world of coaching, I educate coaches, I mentor coaches, and really one of my favorite things is getting to meet people like you know? And Emily, my partner in Coaches in Cahoots, and just so many of our members and the students that I've gotten to work with over the past, oh my gosh, 6 years? I think I've been teaching 6 years now. Just incredible. So many wonderful human beings. But I tell you, Jewel, you really do stand out like a diamond in the sun. Just light going off in every direction. So thank you again, and I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you,
Thank you.
Nikki.